Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 7th International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management. Firstly, let us send our praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for allowing us to gather in health and well-being at this special moment in International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025. May peace and blessing be upon to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Respected all keynote speaker of ICGDM 2025, the Honorable Dean of Faculty Geography Muhammadiyah University of Surakarta, lecturer, and the all participants of ICGDM 2025. Thank you for being here today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Yuka Diva, and I'll be your Master of Ceremony for day 1. Before we start our conference, let us listening to Indonesia National Anthem Indonesia Raya and followed by the Muhammadiyah Anthem Sang Surya. Please stay respectful during the anthem. would like to invite the chairman of International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025 to giving the opening remarks. To the Honorable Chairman, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To our distinguished keynote speakers, respected presenters, colleagues, and participants from around the world, good morning and welcome to International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025. It is my great pleasure and privilege as the chairman of the 7th International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025 to warmly welcome all of you to this important gathering. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to express our sincere gratitude for your presence here, whether you are joining us from Indonesia or from various other countries across continents. In this year's theme is the role of geographic science in addressing global challenge for a sustainable future. It reflects the urgency and complexity of the issues we face today. As we all know, the world is undergoing rapid environmental and socio-economic transformations. Climate change, biodiversity loss, urban expansions, water scarcity, and an increasing frequency of disaster are no longer distant prediction. They are our current reality. This challenge transcends border, disciplines, and sectors. It's requiring coordinated, innovative, and science-based solutions. Geographic science here stands at the center of this effort through spatial analysis, GIS, remote sensing, and geospatial modeling. We have the tools to better understand the pattern, forces, and interactions that shape our environment and society. Geography provides the framework to bridge global challenge with local actions, of course, to ensuring that strategies for sustainability are not only visionary, but also context-specific and equitable. This conference serves as a platform for researchers, academic practitioners, and policymakers to collaborate, share insight, and explore more solutions. We are honored to have with us distinguished speakers and experts from many countries, such as Malaysia, South Africa, Indonesia, Rwanda, Netherlands, and many other countries. Their contribution and the contribution of all of you, the presenters, who will share their research. It will enrich our understanding and inspire new direction in geographic science and disaster management. We hope this conference will not only advance academic knowledge, but also encourage interdisciplinary collaboration, also strengthen international network, and support global framework, such as sustainable development goals. And most importantly, we hope that the discussions held here will lead to tangible, impactful actions that contribute to a safer, more resilient, and more sustainable future for all. To all participants, thank you very much for your enthusiasm, your commitment, and your dedication to advancing geographic science. We deeply appreciate your willingness to share your expertise and to learn from one another. We also extend our sincere appreciation to the organizing team, partner, and the institution who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. Then, ladies and gentlemen, with great honor, I officially declare the 7th International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025 open. May this conference be productive, inspiring, and meaningful for each of us. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the opening. Now we welcome the Dean of the Faculty of Geography Muhammadiyah University of Surakarta, Mr. Jumadi SSI MSc PhD, to give the next opening speech. To the Honorable, time is yours.
Thank you, Yuka. Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all keynote speakers, colleagues, and distinguished guests from around the world. On behalf of our entire Faculty of Geography here at Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta, I'm truly delighted to welcome you to the International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025. Before we begin, I would like to extend a very special and heartfelt welcome to our esteemed speaker, keynote speaker, and our distinguished invited speakers. First of all, we have Professor Muhammad Marfai from the Geospatial Information Agency, Indonesia. The second is Associate Professor Siti Iqbal Saleh from Universitas Teknologi Mara, Malaysia. And the third is Professor Gregory Betske from University of Pretoria, South Africa. And the fourth is Associate Professor Darvis Sadeh Farsehi from University of Twente, the Netherlands. And the last is Vidya Nahriatul Fikriyah from University of Twente, the Netherlands. Also, for all presenters and participants who come from 12 countries, your pioneering work in our field inspired us all, and we are truly honored to have you have chosen to share your valuable insights and expertise with us here today. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. It's so inspiring to see so many brilliant minds from around the world gathered in one virtual room here. We are all here because we share a common passion, understanding our planet, especially the dynamic tropical region for what we call home, and finding smarter ways to live sustainably and manage the risks we face. The conversation we are about to have on everything from harnessing the technology like GIS and remote sensing to tackling very human aspects of disaster and development are crucial. This is not about sharing research, it's about sparking new connection and building the kind of collaborative spirit that lead to the real world solution. So let's make the most of this today. Let's talk, share ideas, ask tough questions, and build a network that extends for beyond this conference. Once again, a heartfelt thank you to everyone for joining us, and special thanks again to our keynote speakers, our presenters, and all participants for leading the way. We are thrilled to have you all here and can't wait to learn and collaborate with you all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Now begin our first keynote session. It is an honor to welcome Professor Dr. Siti Iqbal Saleh from University Teknologi Mara, UTM, Malaysia. The session will be consist 25 minutes and followed by a short question and answer. The session will be moderated by Dr. Abdul Latif Ahadi. The moderator and the speakers, the time is yours. Sorry, for this session will be moderated by Mr. Hamim Hadi Bashir.
Miss Yuka for the introduction. I'm Hamim, currently I'm a PhD student in Built Environment UNSW, and in this occasion, I will be served as the moderator in this session. First, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished guests, keynote speakers, presenters, and participants joining us from around the world. And it's honor for me to serve as the moderator for this first keynote speaker at the 7th International Conference of Geography in Disaster Management 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, our first keynote speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Siti Iqbal Saleh from University Teknologi Mara, or UITM Shah Alam, Malaysia. Dr. Siti Iqbal Saleh is a distinguished scholar in geospatial sciences, particularly in geographic information systems, geospatial modeling, and spatial analysis for sustainable and climate resilient development. Her academic backgrounds include bachelor degree in Geographic Information Science from University of Newcastle, UK, and then MSc from Built Environment, UITM, and she got her PhD in Built Environment from University Teknologi Mara. Today, she will be presenting a keynote entitled Mapping Urban Futures, Geospatial Modeling for Adaptive and Climate Resilient Infrastructure. Due to an unforeseen personal emergency, this keynote will be delivered through a pre-recorded presentations. The operator, without further ado, let us proceed to the keynote presentation. And the host, you may now kindly play the video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow academics, researcher, practitioner, and students. Let me first express my thanks to the organizer for inviting me to share my thoughts at this conference, and it has been a great honor to speak before you today on the topic of mapping urban futures, geospatial modeling for adaptive and climate resilient infrastructure. We know that specifically, GIS modeling offers powerful climate solutions for our rapidly transforming cities. Urban space face an unprecedented pressure and threats, from climate threats to the social demands. But GIS doesn't just map our challenges; it quantifies, it measures the risk, and it helps us solve the problems. And for that, it makes the stakeholder, the decision makers, smarter, faster, and better. Which brings me on how today's session will be unfold. Over the next 20 minutes, I will walk you through these following items. So I will talk about the complex and competing demands of today urbanism, looking into the planetary health, how urban climate functions and shift at multiple scales, and revealing the roles of GIS in studying the invisible climate patterns. I will also share with you two case studies on the heat and also windstorm hazards, and which that helps the policymakers and also urban planners to make a well-informed decision makings. So let's begin with the fundamental challenge we face in our cities today. So the concept of carrying capacity originated from the ecology and mainly focused on the environmental and man-made physical factors. I'm going to just give you a short definition of it. It is basically sustainability in both human and environmental interactions. So we know cities are basically a space of ambitions. It's where the infrastructure, housing, commerce, environment, and equity all compete within the same area, the same footprints. That is why without a sophisticated tools, a comprehensive tools, decision makings, planning run the risk of being reactive and fragmented. We always face competing demands that things, decisions of where to build, decision of where to green, and even where to protect. So without evidence-based tool, planning become a guesswork. This is where GIS comes in. It's translate messy urban reality into an actionable spatial intelligence. Planning boundary. Let's look into a planetary boundary framework. Yeah, we know this framework basically consists of 9 critical Earth system process, and this system basically regulates and moderates the stability and resilience, yeah, of the planet. Think of them as our guards, our guard rails that keeps the Earth's surface safe for us to live in. Yeah, but what 2025 planetary health checks found that 7 out of these 9 um, um, uh, critical Earth system happen to be breached. Yeah? This is a serious red flag. Yeah? It means that humans, several of the critical Earth system process has now under stress, in which putting the ecosystem and human society at risk. Yeah? To understand this, this is where the knowledge of climate sciences and also GIS can integrate and become a powerful set of tools. Yeah, we need to first recognize, yeah, the urban climate itself is not uniform because the urban climate itself operates at a multiple scale. Previous studies have documented that urban climate depends on the surrounding environment. One of the most important elements that make up these climate conditions or climate interaction is the urban parameters. So when talking about urban parameters, there are numerous urban parameters that have been studied around the globe. As you can see in this figure, these are the urban parameters. There are about 16 urban parameters that has been documented today. Yeah. So the interactions of these urban parameters leads to different experiences of urban climate condition within a city. The conditions of the urban climate is measured and defined using climatic variables such as air temperature, wind dynamics, wind movement, speed, environment, and humidity. So these variable interacts with the urban parameters and making the urban climates of each city vary from the other cities. So therefore, gaining insights on how urban parameters interact with climate variable is fundamental for designing safer, healthier, and more climate responsive city, as well as essentials, yeah, for strengthening the disaster risk reduction strategy. So how is this can be achieved? The answer is through urban planning. Urban climate is not one thing. Yeah, obviously it operates at multiple scale. As I've mentioned, it operates at the micro, local, and regional scales. Yeah, because building alters wind, heat, and humidity patterns, and some pavement surface trap heat. Yeah, even topography change the airflow. Yeah. So what GIS do is allows us to capture, quantify, and layer all this complexity of the surface area into variables, yeah, into thematic layers, in which that it turned this complexity into clarity. Yeah. So from micro to local to regional level, cities are all basically alters or creates or develop even their own climate, yeah, because building will be able to redirect winds, surface will be able to trap heat, and landform shades the airflow. So this layer behavior creates what we call as urban climate domes, yeah, the chronicle of the domes, yeah, and that is something that we are going to explore next. So basically, cities create their own own climate, yeah, known as what we call as urban climate dome. Because of concrete, asphalts, and tall buildings, urban areas traps more heat and block natural wind flow, and thus hold more pollution than its surrounding regions. At the ground level, we have what we call as urban canopy layer, the space between buildings where people live and move. Yeah, here street design, traffic, and shading strongly affect the temperatures and airflow. Above the rooftop, we have what we call as urban boundary layer, where heat and pollutants from city rise and mix with the atmosphere and forming the upper parts of the dome. And a major driver of this dome is called an urban surface heat. Hot, dark surface absorb the heat during day and release it slowly at night, create a well-known urban heat island effects. So together, these layers, the urban boundaries layers, urban canopies layer, and urban surface heat process and form what we call as urban climate dome. It's an invisible bubble, that makes cities warmer and less ventilated. And understanding it help us design cooler and healthier and more resilient, more climate resilient urban surface. So in cities, buildings strongly influence how winds move, their shapes, their size, their spacing controls whether the air flows slow, speeds up, or becomes turbulence. For example, tall buildings create frictional drags, which wind flow against them, and these drags sometimes change, in terms of directions. This instability creates turbulence, meaning that this is why gusts in cities can feel very sudden and unpredictable. The spacing somehow in the buildings plays a key role. When the winds is squeezed through a narrow gaps of the building, it accelerates. So this is what we call as Venturi effects, and it explains powerful wind blasts in the alleyways and also in between the high-rise building. So the overall shapes and arrangements of a building creates complex urban wind environment that affects comfort, safety, and also ventilation of the cities. So all of the urban climate drivers that we have discussed, from the heat trapping surface, alter wind flows, reducing ventilation, and the layers of the urban climate dome come from the physical ways cities interact with energy, air, and sunlight. GIS helps us translate these climate physics into practical planning guidance or solutions by mapping the heat hotspot, mapping the wind channels, mapping the wind intensity, mapping the shaded zones, and also turbulent zones. GIS makes invisible climate process visible on the city maps. Hence, we can now strategize our cooling or mitigating or even adaptive efforts within our city. This slide here basically shows you the common 6 urban microclimate management strategy. All are basically a cooling strategy from trees, vegetation, green roof, even cool pavement, smart growth, and also building designs. They all basically green roof, cool pavement, and urban vegetation are powerful mitigation tools, but they must be precisely located in which GIS identify hotspots and prioritize action zones to stretch the limited resource for the maximum impact. But where should they go to be most effective? This is also where GIS identify hotspot, thermal corridors, and ventilation paths, so planners or the decision makers can prioritize with limited budgets to get a maximum cooling impacts. Here is where GIS become truly transformational. It's basically, in this case study, it's integrations of climate models such as WRF with GIS data on terrain, building, and land use. We create what we call as urban climatic map, or UC maps. Urban climatic map basically reveals the real world conditions of climatic patterns, and translate them into planning recommendations, whether to preserve, maintain, mitigate, or to restrict development. Now that we have clearly understand on how basically the climatic conditions or heat or climatic variability basically affects our urban climate, strategies can be put on the right times and the right place. Okay, I think as a scientist, geographers, planners, we must advise our local authority that we must first recognize how capable is our localities, be it physical, infrastructure, socials, or community, respond to the climate change or any sort of natural disasters. So the concept of urban climatic map, I myself was first to know or encountered during a workshop in Hong Kong. So this workshop where all the many of the computational fluid dynamic scientists comes together and share their findings about climate change impact over for the tropical and subtropical region. And what they do is basically they overcomes the problem of windstorm, pollution, and heat by optimizing their existing urban structures. One most important things that we have to know in order for us to adapt the concept of urban climatic map successfully in our region is us to understand the urban climatic condition locally, and it was well understood because the urban climatic models developed worldwidely may not be suited in our region because of the different lines of latitude, different weather systems, and different types of seasons that we have here in Southeast Asia region. Now, what this UC map designed to? It designed to identify the spatial variations in the urban climate, to detect the climatic critical zones, and to provide evidence-based insights for planners to integrate climate-sensitive strategy into urban development. Okay. A little bit of concept on how urban climatic activity is developed. It's basically if you move towards the most right is basically the layers that we arrange in terms of its thematics. It's groups as thermal loads and dynamic potential, in which that we know thermal loads is actually the exposure and dynamic potential is basically the cooling agents or the adaptive capacity agents. From that, what we get is basically the urban climatic maps. For us to go on urban climatic recommendation map, we have to develop what we call as classified urban climatic analysis maps and also a few planning recommendations. So to say that this is basically an automated approach all the way through, it's not correct. We still need a subject matter expert to put their hands and thought and experience and of them being wise of that conditions for us to integrate with whatever scientific evidence that we have calculated using GIS. Okay, so this is like the spin-off of how the overall study is being conducted and how basically all these data are put together as to come up with one we call as urban climatic maps. I'm not going to explain this step by step. Is basically the approach and the methods that is being adopted in the study, and what I'm going to show you is basically the final results. So we know that we have a thermal loads layer that comes from 4 parameters. So remember that this is just one particular pilot or case study in Kuala Lumpur. You probably in Indonesia you probably have different urban parameters. So does in other parts of the regions, because it depends on our local climatic conditions. So in KL for thermal load layer, we develop using 4 thematic layers, while the dynamic potential comes with 5 layers. And with that we have one we call as thermal load layers, and the other one is dynamic potential. We integrate those layers and we come up with what we call as urban climatic analysis map. So what the urban climatic analysis map basically shows you is basically the area that have a very strong or high risk or strong effects of the urban climatic conditions, and the other part shows its potentials to overcome a situation or impacts of climate change. Now, from here we will be able to see the area that is criticals. So there are 27 areas that are critical in Kuala Lumpur in this particular study. So of course it shows the highest z-scores value, in which that we know the Sungai Penchala, Bukit Besi, Bukit Kiara, Bukit Tabu, Bukit Tugu, the University Malaya area, and there are basically the region with that's situated on the red dots area are all most critical subjects, or most critical area for climatically critical areas. This is basically the area that is vulnerable. Yeah. So any development in this particular area should be done with serious attentions. Yeah. Okay, so with that, with the integrations of the subject matter expert, remember that I've mentioned this map just don't the color-coded temperature or color-coded maps. It reveals the critical zones, risks, and planning recommendations. So instead of just producing a static map, UCMap become more actionable tools for planners that lead us on how exactly they support the decision making. So we know the dark green will be preservation. This is the area that already within a good preservation area. We have the area that is well maintained. Class 3 will be the area that are encouraged, when possible. Class 4 is mitigation are recommended and necessary, while Class 5 is basically the most vulnerable area. Mitigation are recommended and essentials. So any development that is positioned in Class 3, 4, 5 will require certain attention. Note that the Class 1 and 2 is where you can simply develop. This area probably functions as the threshold or as our cooling effects of the city area. So whatever positions, whatever proposal of development based on this mitigation zoning, this zonation can work as parts of the baseline before you are making more planning recommendations or development recommendations or development approval. So incorporate additional climate variables such as humidity, rainfall, surface pressure. Develop higher resolution maps for final local planning. Study on urban ewing configurations more thoroughly can give you basically a better mitigation design. Now, UCMap help planners to decide where to limit the density, where to open ventilation corridors, and which zone require mitigations. This support zoning, building guidelines, and also the evidence-led policy. So UCMaps directly support one, zoning decisions, as in, are we building the right place? Are we developing at the right place? Risk mitigation, which area that need urgent actions? Design guideline, how should building adapt to climates? And also strategic preservation, what natural assets can be protected. So you don't just simply launch a greening campaigns, 1 million trees all over your city area without knowing which area that is strategically supposed to be planted or replanted. Maybe the area that has already preserved doesn't need to be you don't have to mobilize your resources, your energy towards this area, but focus on the area in which need more preservation, need more mitigation. So instead of reactive planning, GIS enables you to be proactive and also make a decision that is climate smart decision making. So we have now come to our second case study, which is the Urban Windstorm Hazard Index developed using AHP and PCA. So we know climate risk isn't only heat. In Malaysia, windstorm also pose increasing threats. In this study, we combine AHP and PCA to develop Windstorm Hazard Index, and we integrate meteorological, urban, and social parameters in it. This approach not only predicts vulnerable zones but also helps authorities prioritize resilient infrastructure and emergency response. So in these slides, it's basically introduce the core concept that underpins all disaster risk modeling, but particularly for this case in urban setting. So as shown here, disaster risk is defined as a function of three components: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. I guess many of you have basically very familiar with these three components, right? So a hazard like windstorm doesn't automatically create high risk situations, but if it occurs on the an inhabited or a well-protected area, the impacts might be minimal. But when hazard overlaps with high exposure, meaning that people, building, infrastructure, and those exposed elements are highly vulnerable, for example, a poorly constructed and unprepared urban area or unprepared community, the risk might become severe. Okay, so these interactions form these basics, the basis, for our windstorm hazard index, and we use this model to basically identify areas where all three factors overlap and allowing us to make an assessment of the risk more accurately and also effectively. So this slide explains two key foundations behind the windstorm hazard index: the system approach and also the MCDM approach. So on the left side is basically the system approach, which WHS does not really rely on just meteorological data. It also integrates urban and social parameters as well. This allows us to develop a windstorm hazard that is holistic and also capture not just hazard but also exposure and vulnerability dimensions. On the right hand side is basically the MCDM approach, in which that we use AHP and PCA to assign parameter weights for the UCI. So AHP we know is a structured expert judgment, while PCA is basically the data-driven parts. It reduces dimensionality and tells us which parameter actually explain the most and in terms of the variation in windstorm event. So combining both, we basically get the base of both worlds. Moving on, this diagram on the other hand summarizes the overall workflow, in case if you would like to refer it, and in developing any sorts of actually hazard index and corresponds, to hazard map. We have the data related the data input parts and also the related parameter part and also the statistical analysis parts, and typically it comes to the decision techniques and where GIS basically helps you produce the final output of the hazard index. So this integrated approach ensures that the WHI is not only data driven, but we try to come up with something that is partially accurate and realistically representing the local conditions of your study area, so that when you ever wants to make decisions, it's highly relevant and
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Siti, for the presentation. And from your presentations, we can conclude some key takeaway messages. The first one is geospatial modeling is essential for evidence-based urban planning, allowing policymakers to integrate environmental, social, and infrastructural data into more precise decision-making. The second is climate resilient infrastructure must be proactive rather than reactive, using spatial predictions and scenario modeling to prepare for future climate extremes. And the last one is sustainable urban futures depend on interdisciplinary collaboration, where geospatial scientists, planners, and engineers, as well as local authorities work together to build cities that can adapt to changing climate condition. Although Dr. Siti is not able to join live today, we are still opening a brief Q&A session. If you have a question for Dr. Siti, you can type your question in the chat box, and I will collect them to the committee and send it to the speaker. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there are some questions. Oh yeah, for the email. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The committee will direct the question and then as well as as well as send your query about her email. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. We are still opening for the question. Just type in the chat box. Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. And now we will move to the next agenda, which is giving the certificate to the keynote speaker. And I will share my screen. This is a token of gratitude from ICGDM committee to Professor Dr. Siti Akbar Saleh as the keynote speaker at the 7th International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025. Thank you very much, Dr. Siti, for your presentation and the fruitful informations. Thank you very much, and I'll leave this session and give back to Ms. Yuka Diva. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the first keynote speaker and moderator. We will continue to our second keynote session by Professor Dr. Gregory Britsky from the University of Pretoria, South Africa. This session will be moderated by Wahyu Tias Pramono, MSc. To the moderator and the speaker, the time is yours.
Before we listen to the presentations from our second keynote speaker, let me inform the brief CV of Professor Gregory Bretsky from the University of Pretoria, South Africa. Professor Gregory has been a researcher at the University of Pretoria, for about 15 years. He holds undergraduate degree from the social science from University of Pretoria, and then following the master degree from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam in Netherlands in 2003, and then PhD in 2008 from the University of Pretoria. Professor Britsky primary research interests include analysis the geography of crime. He has a secondary research interest in examining the South Africa higher education landscape. So without further ado, Professor Britsky will deliver his presentation under the title The Importance of Geography in Understanding Crime and Violence in the Global South. So the presentation is about 25 minutes, so time is yours for dear Professor.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pretty new to this audience, so I will. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all today. The title of my presentation is "The Importance of Geography in Understanding Crime and Violence in the Global South." I will align this to the topic of sustainable futures and disaster management and the general importance of being safe and secure in your home environment as a precursor to development, as a precursor to sustainable development and a successful future of any country. I live in the global south. I live in South Africa, on the southern tip of Africa. I'm in a geography, meteorology, and geoinformatics department at the University of Pretoria. So my talk today, I'm going to not focus on one specific case study or problem. I'm going to give you a lot of little examples of work that's been done or work that I've been a part of over the last 10 years or so that has related to the importance of dealing with issues of crime and violence, mostly in South Africa, but the learnings and the rules that can be taken from this research are very much applicable to the global south in general, and that's my main focus. I will give a little bit of background onto myself and my research, why geography and space, I guess, is better word there, why it's important to understand crime and violence, what are the challenges of understanding this in the global south, and what the future holds. So my background, as I mentioned, I am a little bit new to this audience. So I'm from South Africa, from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, which is in Pretoria, which is the capital city of South Africa. My background is in GIS, Geographical Information Systems, but using it to understand issues surrounding sustainable development, resilience, disaster management, but with the specific focus on crime and violence. I also lived for a period of time in New Zealand. This is one major disaster that I experienced in New Zealand in 2011, which was the earthquakes of New Zealand, which occurred. This is the moment of one of the aftershocks in Christchurch in 2011, and that's the city bowl of Christchurch in between two mountain ranges. And a lot of the research I've done focused on the aftermath of this disaster in Christchurch from a crime perspective. Oftentimes, disasters are a catalyst for an increase in violence and crime in areas because often resources are focused away from the primary disaster and giving opportunities, very opportunistic opportunities for crime and violence. So that's one of the pieces of work I did after this. And then I returned to South Africa later. So as the coordinator mentioned, my specific focus is on analyzing violence, seeing violence as an impediment to development and sustainable future for countries. I focus very much on the theoretical and the applied part of this issue. So I'm more interested in how can the results of my work be used in practice and in policy to make changes. I think one of the criticisms of a lot of academics and scholars, myself included, is that a lot of our work sits in journals that are rarely read by people in the field or that are decision makers. And I think that's the one thing I like about what I do is I very much engage with people that make decisions so that hopefully my research has a measurable outcome or impact. So these are some of the three kind of key areas in which I focus on crime mapping, spatial analysis, and ecological analysis. I've done a little bit of everything. The ecological analysis is work that's focused mainly at the neighborhood level, looking at what makes certain neighborhoods resilient in the face of natural adversity, what makes neighborhoods resilient in the face of violence and crime, and to try and understand and translate that information to other neighborhoods that are perhaps less resilient or more prone to crime. So I will focus on some of these. This is my some of the research interests. I'm not going to go over all of these, but you can understand and see that they're quite wide-ranging. I've done a little bit of everything with the primary focus on issues of violence and crime. The first question I'll pose is the issue of, is crime and violence geographic? There's obviously many aspects to violence, and of course, from a geospatial perspective, if any kind of violent incident occurs in a location, which almost all of them do, perhaps not cybercrime, then it is the geographic aspect. If it's geographic, it means it can be mapped, it means it can be analyzed, and this using a range of geospatial techniques, and the output of that can be used to inform and direct resources to where they're most needed. Now, this is very applicable and most important in the global south, where, including in South Africa, which is an extremely violent country and where the resources perhaps are not as similar as in more developed context. Obviously, the study of crime itself is very varied and contains a lot of different aspects. And this is the one geography that's relatively new within this field. Now, from a long time in history, people have attempted to understand or develop theories around why there is violence and what it does to communities. And some have considered it as a man-made disaster. It inhibits development. It inhibits the futures of economies. Makes people weary, feel unsafe. And if you feel like that, then it does inhibit your personal and community development. So these are just some of the theories. Most of these were developed over a period of a few hundred years. The one on the lower right, the social disorganization theory, was developed about 80 years ago, and it was one of the first theories of violence and crime that highlighted the importance of space and the environment in which people live as being a predictor of violence and crime. By the environment, that we mean the social environment, the economic environment, and increasingly the built environment. So facilities within your neighborhood that are tangible, that could increase the risk associated with crime. So we will get to some of them later. This theory of crime, as I mentioned, it was developed about 80 years ago, kind of identified a number of factors which they believed increased the risk of violence in communities. And of course, this violence can lead to general protests, ethnic heterogeneity. So this is an idea of diversity within neighborhoods on the basis of ethnicity, a highly mobile neighborhood where people don't really know each other, a lot of disrupted families. This is where families are broken, either with divorces or separation, and then deprivation, which is a common precursor. So there was an idea that there's a relationship between the environment and crime. Neighborhoods influenced the direction and shape of violent rates, and it didn't the involvement of criminal behavior didn't depend on who the person was. Their study focused on juvenile delinquent males, but on where they lived. If you fast forward from that time to about the turn of the century, or perhaps a little bit before that, in the 1990s, there was the development of a subfield within criminology called environmental criminology. This is not criminology dealing with poaching or illegal fishing. This is a focus or subset of criminology that deals with the spatial and temporal patterning of violence. It focuses on the characteristics of the neighborhood or the area or the street or the apartment complex or the land block where crime is occurring, and what is it about that street, what is it about that neighborhood, what is it about that city, what is it about that country, what is it about that region that increases crime risk. So you focus on the environmental factors, and you focus on things like opportunity. Are there greater opportunities there? Are they easily accessible to people? What's the issues on accessibility? And then the built environment. These are things that can range from the territoriality, the width of the streets, whether there's street lights there, whether there's a guard, whether there's a fence, and it goes really down into the minutiae of the place. So it ranges in scale from a very broad scale to a very, very narrow scale. And the part of this that I enjoy the most is that this knowledge can help identify prevention strategies to modify these environments, to mitigate risk, to mitigate the disaster of violence and crime occurring. So a lot of the work we do when we have an idea of why are most of these incidences happening around this apartment complex, we focus on dealing with local authorities, dealing with relevant stakeholders, or if it's a student housing, the management of it, to try and reduce that risk. So how can geography be used to understand crime and violence in the global south? So there's four main things I think that we can focus on. And the rest of my presentation will outline each of these four very briefly and provide a little snapshot of a project or a study that was done. So the first one is to identify hotspots and concentrations. This is to allow for better target interventions and resource allocation. Through spatial analysis, this can lead to proactive policing strategies, understanding the biggest socioeconomic drivers, and then on urban planning and infrastructure improvements. This can help guide city planners to design safer environments. So the first one is identifying crime hotspots and concentrations. So the two maps that you see there are two regions of South Africa. These are just very simple hotspot maps, relatively easy to make if you do GIS or Geographical Information Systems. The one on the left is scraped through Twitter and X feeds and media feeds, looking at protests, public protests in the Gauteng province, which is the province which contains two major cities in South Africa. This information is scraped together from the internet. So this is not from official police sources, but rather from X and TikTok, where any kind of protest hashtag or protest link is extracted and pulled over a period of a year or two. This is especially the case in terms of violent protests due to poor service delivery or based on the upcoming elections. The one on the right-hand side, this is a simple, also done by a colleague of mine, Lizette Lancaster, looking at the number of events, particularly related to homicide in the Cape Town region of South Africa. So this is very basic identification of hotspots and concentrations, but it does become more nuanced because understanding where the hotspots and these concentrations are can help guide police and relevant law authorities to these locations. But to understand why the hotspots and concentrations are occurring involves more nuance. Work done by myself and colleagues in South Africa and from overseas looks at other more the built environment related to crime risk in hotspots and concentrations. These are some of the studies have highlighted the importance of shopping malls, schools, parks, computer nodes, and even toilets. A lot of the township areas of South Africa, the toilets are mobile toilets, so they're not toilets in the dwelling, but they're toilets that are mobile toilets in extremely poor areas that increase crime risk. And all of these facilities in the built environment have increased crime risk. In terms of concentration, there's been work done by myself and colleagues that have looked at crime concentrations at various scales. The top study done a number of years ago looked at how a very low percentage of neighborhoods contained a high percentage of the amount of assaults or robberies or rape. In Khayelitsha, on the right-hand side is a map at the street segment level where we snapped crime and violence incidences to the nearest street. And for example, we found that 25% of streets contain 75% of all crime and violence. In fact, we determined that almost half of all crime in this part of South Africa, which is extremely high crime and violent, was contained on 8 kilometers of road. So by doing that, we were able to say to the relevant law authorities that it's not important to disseminate or rather send your patrols to the whole of the neighborhood, even in a high crime neighborhood or a high crime police precinct. It's a very small percentage of streets that contain most of the crime. So in countries like South Africa, where crime is very high, even though it's very high, it's very concentrated. We also have done other analysis looking at the importance of time. If you combine time into this equation, you also narrow down the specific places at specific times at which these crimes occur. So from a geographical perspective and from a disaster management perspective, I think we should raise more awareness of the importance of geographical science in understanding this issue. I think we should disseminate global crime statistics more readily and build online platforms for global communities and communities in the Global South to report crime and violence, to be able to compare this information across context. Secondly, from a spatial analysis perspective, this is some work done by myself and other colleagues, highlighting the importance of the physical environment in understanding violence and crime. In this particular study, we looked at the importance of green space. Green space relates to things like parks, open patches of vegetation, and the importance of having safe and accessible access to a park or a green space in your community or in your neighborhood, not just for physical exercise, but also for the mental health benefits that arise from being close to a green space. And we found that being close to green space reduces violence and property and decreases in violence and property crime. In another study with colleagues, we also showed the importance of climate change on violence and crime, and finding how on very hot days that are over 28 degrees Celsius, there was a 50% increase in the risk of violence occurring. So this is also some important information that can be highlighted and shown to people, relevant law authorities that deal with trying to police these areas. Other work done by the Institute for Security Studies has shown the importance of understanding the local environment. In the middle map there are two sites in which there was a case control study done on the importance of hotspot policing. The one is a control site in the same neighborhood. The other one is a case site in which there were random and rapid policing patrols done. You can see the briefing on the lower left-hand side. And there was a much bigger reduction in contact crime in the hotspot areas where there were focused control and randomized policing interventions done compared to the control site, where there was no intervention done. So I think from a spatial analysis perspective, that's just some idea of the work done. I think there should be more spatial analysis research done in the Global South. In countries like Indonesia, where there are broader investigations and cross-comparative studies with other diverse countries in the Global South, like South Africa, to examine things like spatial crime displacement, journey to crime modeling, geographic profiling, re-victimization, and so much more to understand this issue. I'll go back to what I mentioned at the start of the presentation, where the most basic human right is for people to feel safe in their environment. If you do not feel safe in your environment due to the risk of crime and violence, then every other disaster that befalls you is exacerbated because you don't have that calmness of living in an environment where you feel safe. I think we need to find a mechanism through which the results of studies are disseminated to key role players across countries. And I think there needs to be more engagement collaboratively to gauge spatial analysis and results. The third of the four is to understand the broader socioeconomic drivers of crime. So these are what are the underlying broader socioeconomic issues in each country that increase risk? They could be the same or in the Global South, or they could be different. The Global South deals with very similar challenges, countries in the Global South, but there could be also similarities or differences. So this is some work done quite a while ago now in South Africa, where we found that low social status and income, a large and a young family, to be an unskilled employer, and to have, again, higher residential mobility increased offender risk, or the development of offenders. In work done, later work done by a number of colleagues, we found that the three biggest predictors of violence and disruption in neighborhoods were, again, a disrupted family, high increase of divorced or separated families, where the father is deceased or estranged, and a young male population. I think from a broader ecological perspective, again, I reiterate the importance of trying to do more cross-comparative ecological analysis research in the Global South, to understand the broader and underlying socioeconomic drivers of crime in high-risk and low-risk communities. And I mentioned earlier this importance of resilience. There's a lot of work done on the importance of communities and individuals being resilient to disasters. Any disaster can befall a community or a country, but some people in some neighborhoods and some streets and some apartments are more resilient to this. And understanding why certain people or certain neighborhoods or certain streets are more resilient to the face of, in my context, violence and crime, but also to the broader issue of disaster, whatever that disaster is. I think that's one of the key future development areas in this scholarly space. And I think I'm very interested in that. People are also interested. Finally, this is something on broader urban planning and infrastructure improvements. I mentioned earlier what environmental criminology is, trying to identify aspects or issues in the environment that increase risk. If you're able to identify these, then the next logical argument is that you can modify. If we know that there's a higher issue of violence in a neighborhood or street because there's no streetlights, we can put streetlights up, and hopefully that mitigates the risk. So that's at the very basic level. It gets more complicated and more nuanced than that. These are just some studies done on the left-hand side in Harare, which is a very high crime area outside Cape Town, with students identifying through these red blocks. This was a survey done by students in the area, identifying where they felt very unsafe and trying to identify these areas and what it is about those areas. The two right-hand side maps are done this year by one of my postgraduate students. This is an area surrounding our university where students feel that they do not feel safe walking around the university campus for various reasons. We try to understand why. And on the right-hand side, we developed various safe routes for the students to walk, especially if they have exams or assessments late in the evening, and to lower their risk or mitigation. And the long-term idea is to integrate that into an app that the students can use. I think there is a lot of potential for future growth in this area from an urban planning and infrastructure perspective. I think we should and could integrate spatial data and crime mapping to identify urban features that are increased risk, collaborate with others, planners and engineers to design safer, more inclusive environments, advocate for evidence-based urban policies, and examine how rapid urbanization and informal development shape patterns of violence and crime. Again, I think there is opportunities in the Global South for this to happen cross-collaboratively. I think there are great opportunities there to learn from each other. Just one slide on the challenges. These are challenges that are specific to South Africa, but they also may be applicable to other countries in the Global South. And the biggest one is data availability and quality. Often getting access to data, unless you capturing a primary data yourself through a survey or something else. Getting it from authorities can be a challenge. The spatial data that you do get can be misaligned. There could be geocoding issues in trying to match where the incident occurred with the actual address. There's technical barriers in terms of infrastructure, internet access. Often there's financial constraints with training and implementation. And there's interagency coordination, especially at the governmental and local government level, that hinders development. And there's also often a lack of support or a lack of buy-in from people. And I think this is where anyone that is interested in my presentation and interested in the work I do and its relevance in your particular context, I would really encourage you to reach out to me and email me and if you are able to have any other information that's relevant, then I'm more than happy to chat to you. This is one of the challenges in South Africa. I think South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, next to Brazil. This is a snapshot of one scene in South Africa where you have a very developed area on the left-hand side and a very underdeveloped area on the right-hand side, separated by less than a kilometer. In terms of any disaster that befalls this area of South Africa, and this area, this scene that you see plays out in most cities in South Africa. Any disaster that befalls this area, imagine the different responses that are required for each of those areas. The one has a very formal road network, swimming pools, access, large areas, gardens. On the right-hand side, there is almost zero access, either by, in fact, I know the police go by horseback on the areas on the right-hand side, but even then they refuse to go to some areas because of the flooding that occurs and because of the risk of being ambushed. So the mitigation of disasters here requires a completely different approach for each area that are extremely close together. And this poses serious challenges for countries like South Africa, which is high inequality, and addressing that. Obviously, from a police and violence perspective, it's equally as challenging. Last slide on the future, and this obviously AI is a big buzzword in the last few years. There's this idea of smart cities and AI integration, dealing with predictive policing, surveillance, and Internet of Things sensors, trying to build cities that are more receptive to interventions aimed at alleviating crime and violence. Mobile apps I mentioned briefly for real-time crime and violence reporting and crowdsourced data. And then real-time GIS dashboards, which are kind of in vogue in South Africa and globally, with these integrating these dashboards with live stream data and AI-driven pattern recognition with the data that is coming in through various sources. So yes, thank you very much. I am aware that this talk is probably a little bit different to the talks that you're going to receive over the next 2 days. Maybe not, but I think it provides an important difference in terms of understanding my key research area, which is obviously how crime and violence impacts development and can be used to mitigate the response to any kind of disaster that occurs. I'm in South Africa. This is my address. This is my email address and my work address. And if anyone would like to ask a question, as I said, you're more than welcome to now, or if you would prefer to send me an email and initiate some kind of collaboration or just make contact and speak to me a little bit about the work you do and its possible linkages with what I've just presented, then I'm more than happy to engage. I think we should engage more across the Global South, and we don't, and that's sad. And yes, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Professor Gregory. So we're gonna have several minutes left. From the chat box, we have one question for you. So you may answer the questions after I read that questions. So since the environment become one of the influencing factor, if a location has been identified as a crime hotspot, will it become a crime hotspot ever since?
Will it become a crime hotspot?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get the last section.
If a location has been identified as a crime hotspot, will it become the crime hotspot ever since?
It depends. It depends on the environment around that hotspot. And most hotspots occur because of a combination of three things. There are offenders there. There are people there. There is a lack of a guardian. Now, a guardian can be a person, it can be a dog, it can be a bar, it can be a patrol. But if there is an absence of that thing, and if there's a suitable target, so the suitable target could be a person. If it's a interpersonal crime, it can be the target could be a car that someone wants to steal. The target could be a laptop that someone wants to steal. So it depends on the combination of those three things, whether there's offenders there, whether there's a target, and whether there's an absence of a capable guardian. And where those three things combine, the increase doesn't say crime will occur or a hotspot will occur, but the theory says that the risk will increase. So obviously, crime has a rhythm to it, and those rhythms kind of dovetail according to the availability of those three elements. If you think of your daily rhythm, your daily routine, when you wake up and you go to school or university or work, and then you maybe go for a walk, or you go to the shop, or you go to the gym, or and then you come home, those daily activities, those routine activities increase your risk of crime occurring, depending on whether they align or match with those three elements. As you stop at the shop, you will be with other people at the shop or at the market. There will be lots of targets there. You could be a target. The shop could be a target. Your car or your bicycle could be a target. There's lots of people around, and if your bicycle is left unlocked, then it could be stolen, right? So a hotspot can remain a hotspot. It can not necessarily become a bigger crime problem or violence problem. It depends on how those three elements vary in space and time over a specific location.
So one more question. The book, what the geographic data are the most useful for analyzing patterns?
So is that on the chat?
From Lisa Yasmin.
What geographic data are the most useful analyzing? So that's a good question. The most important geographic data for analyzing crime and violence patterns is probably official data that you can get from official police sources, like from local police or from statistics that's often published by governments, by countries. That's usually at a very broad level, like a police precinct level or a municipality level or a city level. That allows you to do a national study across a whole country, for example. If you're able to get finer geographic data, like data on locations where crime occurred in a city, like the actual address, this is often very difficult to get from police, but it's not impossible. And in most countries in the world, if you go through the correct channels and the research process, then you are able to access that geographical data, and then you can map it. And once you can map it, then it opens up a whole lot of possibilities and hypotheses and research questions that you can ask. It is also possible to analyze crime patterns using survey data. If you're able to align a specific crime incident with a geographical neighborhood or city or region or street or what have you. So the short answer is data to the police would be the first choice. If that's too difficult to get, then national statistics or statistics that are often released annually from an official source in the country would be also something that you could use, and that would mainly be at the national level.
Okay, thank you so much for Professor Gregory. So before we move to the next for the third speakers, so I would give you the certificate through virtual. So thank you so much for Professor Gregory. This is your certificate as the second keynote speaker for the ICGDM from Department of Geography, Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta of Indonesia. Okay, thank you so much for dear audience and also the participants. So we move to Miss Yuka to the next speaker for this first sessions of our international.
Thank you for our second keynote speaker. Up next is our third keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Aris Marfai, MSc, from Gadjah Mada University, Indonesia. This session will be moderated by Dr. Anissa Trisnia Sasmi, MT. Before we begin this session, allow me to introduce our moderator. Our third moderator is Dr. Anissa Trisnia Sasmi, MT, a lecturer at the Faculty of Geography, Muhammadiyah University of Surakarta. Dr. Anissa completed her undergraduate studies in geophysics at Gadjah Mada University, and later her master's and doctoral degree in geophysical engineering are from Institut Teknologi Bandung. Her research focused on seismology, earthquake analysis, and tsunami hazard studies, with several publications in leading international journals. To the moderator and speakers, time and place is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management 2025. And my name is Anissa Trisnia Sasmi, and I am honored to serve as the moderator for this lecture session. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Muhammad Aris Marfai from the Faculty of Geography, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Professor Aris Marfai, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, not so loud, but I'm hearing.
Oh, okay. Okay, and Professor Aris Marfai is a leading scholar in earth sciences, disaster mitigation, coastal geomorphology, and also environmental geoscience. And he earned his Master of Science from ITC, University of Twente in Netherlands, and completed his doctoral degree at Justus Liebig University, Gießen in Germany. And he has published extensively and is recognized internationally for his contributions to geospatial science and disaster risk studies. And he is currently serves as the head of the Geospatial Information Agency, or BIG, Badan Informasi Geospasial of Indonesia. And today he will deliver a presentation which is titled The Strategic Role of Geospatial Information in Addressing Climate Action. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcoming Professor Aris Marfai. And Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Do you hear me clear?
Clear, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I start the presentation, it was already introduced by the Master of Ceremony. I would like to share with you all related to the role of geospatial information in addressing the climate actions. Nowadays, if we may already aware that one of the important on the Sustainable Development Goals is the goal number 13, which is the climate action, meaning we have to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. And one of the important of this impact of climate change, if we have looked entire the Indonesia is vulnerable to climate-induced disaster. This is no doubt. We understand, all of us already knows about this, including the risk and also the multiple natural hazards that may occur, including floods, landslide, drought, forest fire, etc., and so on. The last flood and landslides occurring in Cilacap and Banjarnegara prove us the most devastating disaster due to the climate change. Indonesia is among the top 35 countries with the highest disaster risk in the world. So we are around, or we have around 40% of our population is actually in a risk. Having this fact, the Indonesian government has committed to reducing the emission by 29% compared to the business as usual scenario by 2030. So we have 5 years left and up to 41% with the international support. Why it is important? It is important because this is one of the ways that we can reduce our disaster. So by having this knowledge, what is the role of the geospatial information then? This geospatial information actually can support activities on climate-induced, for example, hydrometeorological disaster risk reduction management activities. The climate action-related mapping based on our policy, we have right now one map policy, and we have also the National Geospatial Information Network, meaning for integration, synchronization, and distribution of various required thematic maps. And this thematic map refers to all the thematic map, including the disaster thematic maps, for example, flood hazard, earthquake hazard, risk assessment, risk mapping, evacuation route, etc., and so on. So that should be considered as the thematic map, and that should supposed to be built upon the what we call base map, our peta rupa bumi Indonesia. Again, that I'm sorry, this is corrupted on our slide, but anyway, as we understand that high climate risk area in Indonesia are including urban and coastal zone area, and for those activities, we need what we call data-driven planning, align climate adaptation with land use and infrastructure strategies. What is the geospatial information for disaster risk reduction then? According to our law number 4, 2011, geospatial information is all type of the information that have an element of location, meaning the georeference, both on the surface, inside the earth, as well as above the earth surface. Everything that they have the coordinate in the form of point, line, or polygons, that can be considered as geospatial information. If we have a look into detail, the geospatial information can be divided into 3 big domains. The first is basic geospatial information, the second is thematic geospatial information, and the third is geospatial information infrastructures. On the basic geospatial information, we have what we call base map atau peta rupa bumi Indonesia. On the way we are managing our base map, the base map should include at least, according to the law number 4, 2011, 8 layers. Namely in the layer of coastline, hydrographic, geographical name or toponym, administrative boundary, transportation, building, as well as land cover. Comparing with Google Maps, for example, which exist in Indonesia, some people say that Google Maps are more rigid and more complete, but actually not. According to our law number 4, the complete base map should containing each layer. So that's why our base map, Rupa Bumi Indonesia, is considered to be the most complete one compared to other maps that are already exist in Indonesia. The thing is only we need more detailed scale. We are now already finished with 50,000 scale of Rupa Bumi Indonesia, but we are now just starting for the detailed scale 5,000 from the Rupa Bumi Indonesia. Anyway, the second domain is the thematic geospatial information. Unlike the basic geospatial information, which is handled by PIG, all the thematic geospatial information should be handled by Kementerian, Lembaga, and Pemda, meaning by the sectorals, agencies, ministries, etc., and so on. So again, PIG not producing the thematic map, for example, flood map, earthquake map, forest fires map, land subsidence map, mangrove map, forest map, transportation map, etc., and so on. Those are considered as thematic map, and therefore should be done by the relevant ministers and agencies. But on the way they are building the thematic map, they should follow the rule of the mapping which is borne by PIG, as well as should develop upon the basic geospatial information or upon the Peta Rupa Bumi Indonesia. Then later on we have the geospatial information infrastructures, meaning the data infrastructures, doing the standard and regulation, human resources, institutional arrangement, etc., and so on. It should be regulated by Geospatial Information Agency of Indonesia. So based on those explanation, when we are talking about the disaster risk reduction cycles, meaning we are starting from the early warning, emergency response, rehabilitation, reconstruction, risk assessment, preventions, awareness and capacity building, preparedness, etc., and so on. On those every steps, we need the geospatial information in different ways and in different format. Geospatial information will have important rules for several activities of the disaster risk reduction management on priorities. Let's be going into detail. As I mentioned earlier, that geospatial information of PIG serve and provide us the geodetic reference frames, continuously operating reference station or course, tide gauge, geodetic network, GeoID, basic map, RPE, thematic map, one map policy, etc., and so on. So those are really very important when we are talking about disaster risk reduction in any cycles of this disaster risk reduction program. I will give you one of the example, the importance of geospatial data. Currently, PIG, our agency, has more than 290 tide gauge station. These tide gauge atau stasiun pasang surut is used for reference map. Jadi stasiun pasang surut di PIG itu digunakan untuk tujuan referensi pemetaan agar petanya selalu tergeoreferensi, selalu berada di koordinat yang tepat, sehingga kita perlu koreksi vertikal dengan tide gauge atau pasang surut. But another hand, our tide gauge station can be used to monitor the sea level in such way help support the modeling of the tsunami, for example, or the modeling of the coastal flooding by using the tide gauge. Stasiun pasang surut kita itu datanya ternyata bisa digunakan untuk pemodelan tsunami. Jadi ini sebenarnya peran BIG dalam disaster management atau peran data geospasial dalam disaster management. And our tide gauge is very detailed. It works 24 hours, 7 days, with data every second. we come up with 5 seconds. Every 5-second data has been sent to the centers containing seconds data, every second data. So you can imagine, Anda bisa membayangkan data kita itu bekerja 24 jam 7 hari dengan data per detik dikirimkan ke pusat, ke data center kita setiap 5 detik. Dan data ini sudah dipakai oleh BMKG untuk antisipasi atau early warning terhadap tsunami dan nanti terhadap earthquake. There is the our equipment, ini kenampakan equipment kita. We have the small building near the harbor, yang warnanya orange itu, yang kayak kandang munyuk. Itu sebenarnya kandang untuk menempatkan sensor-sensor kita, dan dia bekerjanya melalui FTP sensor, kemudian web services, streaming setiap 5 detikan isinya data per detik. Dan itu kita monitor datanya dan sudah dipakai salah satunya oleh BMKG. In every building like this, we have 3 different equipment which measuring the same thing, which is the tide level, sea tide level. Kita punya 3 instrumen dalam satu kamar itu. The first is radar system, the second is pressure system, the third is floating system. 3 sistem itu, sistem yang menggunakan radar yang di luar itu, yang ada ujungnya kayak topi itu. Kemudian 2 di dalam, itu untuk sistem pressure menggunakan tekanan dari permukaan air, dan satunya floating menggunakan pemberat untuk melihat kenaikan muka air laut. The second thing, beside the tide gauge, we have also what we call GPS course. Course meaning abbreviation from continuously operating reference station. This course actually has been used to georeference system. We have more than 450 course station across the Indonesia. Kita punya lebih dari 450, tepatnya 490 sebetulnya. Stasiun course, continuously operating reference station, yang ini stasiun tersambung dengan GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite System, yang kita gunakan untuk sistem referensi. Jadi peta itu kalau nggak ada georeferensinya nonsen, dia akan melayang-layang kan, nggak tahu dia di koordinat berapa. Dan untuk menjaga koordinat itu secara rigid, kita menggunakan satu tide gauge tadi, stasiun pasang surut, dan yang kedua stasiun course ini. Nah, course ini mengukur horizontal dan vertikal, sehingga setiap pergerakan lempeng bahkan bisa diukur dengan ini. Our course system actually has been using for measuring the reference system by connecting this vehicle, this equipment, to the GNSS station. Fortunately, this data can be used as well to monitor the lempeng tectonic, to monitor this, what you call it, tectonic movement, or to monitor the what you call it, the plate movement. If you have look at the picture, for example, this is the direction of the movement of our plate actually, the split tectonic. Jadi Kalimantan itu bergeser agak ke timur bawah dikit, Sulawesi itu agak ke utara timur dikit. Itu yang kita baca dari stasiun course kita. Jadi ini bisa digunakan juga untuk antisipasi gempa bumi dan juga pergeseran lempeng. Itu kalau secara horizontal, kalau secara vertikal kita juga bisa menggunakan ini untuk land subsidence. Karena data kita ini datanya per milimeter koordinat geser, baik itu ke samping maupun ke atas bawah. This equipment actually also recording the movement vertically. In such a way, we can use this data to monitor the land subsidence. Tadi untuk kebencanaan. Those were our basic geospatial information. Now we come to the thematic geospatial information. For example, we have the hazard map, disaster affected map, vulnerability map, everything you may mention, they should be built upon the basic map. Jadi baiknya memang peta tematik itu harus dibuat di atas peta dasar yang sama. Kenapa? Agar bisa diinteroperability-kan. Kalau Anda punya hazard map, mau di-overlay dengan peta infrastruktur, mau di-overlay dengan peta batas administrasi, mau di-overlay dengan peta land cover, maka harus dibuat di atas peta dasar yang sama agar bisa diinteroperability-kan. One of the important requirement to develop the thematic map is that should be developed upon the RBI map in such a way allow us to do the interoperability analysis, overlay analysis, and so on. So therefore, in every step of the disaster management, we have the different thematic maps. And once we are developing the thematic map, we should follow the regulation rule which is borne by BIG. Kita ikuti aturannya, misalnya NSPK-nya, standar pemetaannya, reference system-nya, itu kita sudah atur di peraturan BIG, tinggal dipakai. Nah, di dalam setiap kebencanaan itu mesti ada data spasialnya. Baik di prevention kita punya peta kerawanan, peta spatial planning, di persiapan kita juga punya peta kontingensi, nanti di emergency response, di tanggap darurat kita juga punya misalnya peta kerusakan, peta evakuasi, kemudian di rehabilitasi kita juga perlu peta perencanaan rehabilitasi. Jadi sebetulnya informasi geospasial dalam bentuk peta itu mesti dipakai di semua tahapan itu. That is one of the example of geospatial data utilization platform for climate action. We are trying to integrate the climate action disaster mitigation into spatial planning. Currently, VIG has the big program as a mandatory geospatial reference and source to perform thematic analyzing, as I mentioned. Now we are developing Indonesian National Large Scale Base Map atau peta dasar skala besar, yaitu 5.000 yang akan dibuat di seluruh Indonesia. Saat ini kita sudah selesai di Sulawesi dan kita akan menyelesaikan di seluruh sisanya dalam 3 tahun ke depan. Data yang didapatkan tidak saja 1:5.000, tapi foto udara dan 3 dimensi objeknya itu bisa kita dapatkan. On the next 3 years forward, Indonesia will develop the large scale base map, including the 3D map for the entire of Indonesia. Right now, we already finished this Sulawesi. In Sulawesi with 5,000, and this is already has been weighed by the many agencies, especially to develop the rencana detail tata ruang atau RDTR. Because our RDTR should be built upon the 5,000 large scale. Jadi peta RDTR kita itu harus dibangun di atas peta 5.000. Sehingga senyampang kita membuat spatial planning, kita juga perlu mengintegrasikannya dengan climate action in detail spatial planning. This according to the Minister of Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning, Regulation number 11/2021, that is the procedure for preparing the detailed spatial plan. And one of the important thing is that we should have adaptation and mitigation aspect on the RDTR. The climate action integration in spatial planning create the resilient, sustainable space responsible to the climate challenge. For example, there is the evacuation route must utilize existing infrastructure network to enhance community resilience. It is true and correct. And evacuation sites, including assembly point, for example, temporary shelters, and final evacuation areas are mandatory spatial planning elements. Ini harus ya. And then protecting zone, for example, forest, peatland, and local protection area serve as climate adaptation strategies in spatial development, and therefore they should be depicted into our detailed spatial planning. Jadi RDTR kita itu ya paling tidak harus memfasilitasi, memberikan informasi terkait dengan protected zone, evacuation routes, evacuation site, dan banyak lagi. This integrated climate action and disaster mitigation in spatial planning support the dynamic, evidence-based regional planning, as well as infrastructure design and emergency preparedness. The question is why the spatial planning must consider climate action. Now we already know that evidence-based regional planning, our geospatial data integration, for example, utilizing hazard map, climate projection, and vulnerability assessment to inform land use regulation and development restriction. Ya, kalau kita mau membuat planning yang detail dalam pemanfaatan lahan, tentu kita perlu mempertimbangkan berbagai aspek kebencanaan, vulnerability assessment, climate projection tadi. Ini sebagai salah satu evidence base dalam perencanaan wilayah kita. Yang tidak kalah pentingnya, kita juga harus perlu melihat sejarah kebencanaan, pemodelan iklim, kemudian analisis demografi untuk mengetahui zona beresiko tinggi dan juga untuk melakukan delineasi, mengalokasikan pada perencanaan keuangan kita. Juga misalnya pada evakuasi dan persiapan emergensi, it is also important for us to have the strategic location planning for safe assembly point during the emergencies. Ini kalau semakin detail petanya, ya semakin detail perencanaan, semakin butuh detail peta, desain perencanaannya harus detail, termasuk misalnya assembling point-nya juga harus dimunculkan. It is also important to have the temporary shelter designation for disaster-affected population, as well as the essential infrastructure for community resilience. Another important thing is the disaster mitigation framework, which is include the physical development, for example, risk reduction infrastructure, and land use planning. Again, land use planning are very important. Also, awareness and capacity building is another important things. Legal foundation, the rule, regulation, that's also the standards is also very important for us. Last but not least, the integration climate action into spatial planning, incorporating the geospatial information is important with the purpose on the implementation of geospatial data and information for climate action aim to optimize. Again, I have to repeat, to optimize the use of geospatial data and information for application that support the analysis, synthetic formulation, modeling, scenario, decision making related to the climate change risk evacuation, supporting mitigation and adaptation action. It is important for us, actually. So now we also develop a platform that enable the government, private sector, and society to assemble climate change risk and impact, supporting good mitigation and adaptation strategies. Right now we have what we call portal satu data atau geoportal, INA geoportal. Anda bisa mengakses di sana, ada 151 peta tematik termasuk peta kebencanaan yang diberikan akses terhadap publik. Dulunya enggak, sekarang diberikan akses terhadap publik sesuai dengan peraturan yang terbaru. Anda sebagai sekolah juga bisa mengakses seluruh data tide gauge, data pasang surut, juga data stasiun course di BIG, sementara ini masih gratis. Cuma nanti mungkin kita perlu buat regulasi kalau untuk komersil, karena course kita itu banyak sekali dipakai oleh perusahaan tambang, dan untuk tujuan-tujuan bisnis ini nampaknya nanti perlu dengan harga tersendiri agar bisa pemasukan untuk negara. Tapi untuk sekolah, untuk riset seperti Anda tentu free, dan kita punya di 250 stasiun di Indonesia termasuk 400 stasiun course di Indonesia. Ini sebagai bentuk komitmen pemanfaatan informasi geospasial dalam bidang pendidikan dan juga dalam rangka untuk pengurangan resiko bencana sesuai dengan tema pada seminar siang hari ini. That's all that I can share to you, and if we still have time, we can continue to have the question and answer. Thank you very much, and I send back to the Master of Ceremony or to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aris Marfai, for the insightful and inspiring presentation. And in summary, there are several key points of the presentation we can learn. The first is the strategic role of geospatial information in climate action, that geospatial data supports climate risk analysis, hydrometeorological disaster management, and integration of thematic maps through the One Map policy and national geospatial networks. And the second one, the geospatial data for DRR and climate impact monitoring, that hazard, vulnerability, and risk map combined with the sea level rise data, INATIOS and GPS scores. Deformation monitoring provide essential evidence for understanding and reducing the climate-related disaster risk. And the last is integration of climate action into spatial planning. And okay, so we will now begin our question and answer session. If you wish to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand and unmute your microphone and state your name and affiliation. Okay. Do you have any question? Okay, from Mr. Oscar, time is yours.
Yes, terima kasih banyak. Nama saya Oscar dari Rwanda. Sekarang kerja di museum sebagai manajer. Izin bertanya yaitu untuk terkait yang Profesor dah presentasi. So I want to ask you, in what you have present, do you have some mechanism or some tools that can help you to predict what should be happen in the future? Because you said you have the current sensor, which sensor what is happening, but also do you have something which can predict what will happen in the future? Because as we know, Indonesia is sitting on fire. Thank you.
Okay, Prof. Aris, maybe you will answer directly.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for the very good question. We have the long period data, both of the tides data as well as the plate movement data. We recording using the GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems, allow us to have detailed data in a millimeter and centimeter of the movement. Unfortunately, we are not following up the data into the models or into the prediction or early warning, since that is beyond of the our capacity in PIG. In PIG, we are providing the data actually for our main purpose to build our geo-reference system. In such a way, our geo-reference system more detailed, more rigid, and therefore convenient to be used for developing the basic maps. Everything are actually for reference system purpose. However, if other institution has or willing to utilizing this data, for example, right now already used by BMKG, the Agency for Meteorological, Climatological and Geophysics, to develop the modeling of the tsunami and also the early warning of the tsunami, because once the earthquake happen on the sea, they will create the different level of sea surface. And the even it's only millimeter sea surface increase or decrease, they will give impact to our equipment. So therefore, it's recorded in our equipment. And we send this information to PMKG, and they can create the model, they can give the response. However, in our institution, we don't have continuing this into the, as you mentioned, to the prediction, since this is beyond our scope and capacity of the institution. However, later on, when I'm finishing from this agency, I'm back to the university. As a researcher, for sure, I will use the data to develop the model. And this is also one of the important data that actually can benefit more rather than for georeference only. Thank you, Oscar.
Okay, thank you, Oscar, for the question, and thank you, Professor Aris, for the answer. Maybe one more question from Muhammad Faruk Ghazali. Please, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Baik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pada Profesor Ahmad Haris Bapai. Salam sehat kita semua. Baik, I'm Faruk Ghazali. I'm lecturer at the State University of Medan. Mungkin pertanyaannya adalah terkait dengan sebenarnya bagaimana BIG memastikan sinkronisasi antara peta batas BI peta batas resmi yang sudah dipublis ya dari peta batas desa dari BIG itu. Nah, agar tidak terjadi perbedaan referensi seperti itu. Nah, currently saya sedang melaksanakan boundary mapping in village on Nias Island, collaboration with NGO in provinsi North Sumatra. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Professor Aris, please. Okay, Professor Aris, can you hear our voice here?
Can we wait for 3 seconds, 3 minutes, because there is Adhan very loud here, and I could not hear you.
Oh, okay.
Ya, terima kasih. Saya memahami mungkin pertanyaannya. Nanti koreksi kalau salah yang saya tangkap. There is the boundary map, including the village map, as the responsibility of the mapping from BIG. BIG itu punya tugas untuk melakukan pemetaan batas administratif mulai dari desa, kecamatan, kabupaten, kota, provinsi, sampai batas negara. Khusus untuk batas desa, itu kita menggunakan agreement bersama dengan aparat desa. Tidak ada ceritanya BIG melakukan delineasi sendiri, karena BIG tidak Kementerian Dalam Negeri. Sehingga kita tidak mempunyai kewenangan juga. Untuk itu, dalam membuat peta batas desa, selalu diawali dengan batas kartometrik. Yang kartometrik itu artinya kita mendelineasi pada peta. Kalau sudah kita delineasi, kita ada kesepakatan di antara dua desa itu beserta tokoh-tokoh adatnya dan juga pimpinan kepala desanya. Kalau kesepakatan terjadi, kemudian kita melakukan pengecekan batas-batas patok di lokasi, di lapangan. Kalau itu sudah ada, baru ada agreement, kemudian dikasih batasnya. Kemudian peta batas desa itu disahkan melalui SK oleh bupati ataupun wali kota. Setelah itu sah, baru digambar oleh BIG. Kalau pertanyaannya sejauh mana BIG melakukan pemetaan itu, keabsahan dan kebenarannya sangat tergantung dari bagaimana partisipasi publik dan pemerintah daerah untuk membantu dan untuk berpartisipasi mewujudkan batasnya. Di Jawa misalnya itu lebih mudah dilakukan karena sudah sedikit tertata. Di luar Jawa seperti di Papua itu mungkin agak sulit karena ada batas peta adat dan lain sebagainya. Sehingga kalau Anda mempunyai permasalahan tentang regulasi untuk melakukan pemetaan batas desa, maka Anda bisa diskusi dengan Direktorat Batas Wilayah di tempat kita untuk mendapatkan guiding. Saya paham saat ini banyak sekali pihak ketiga konsultan yang dimintai untuk melakukan pemetaan batas. Dalam rangka pemetaan batas itu harus ada step-step yang diikuti. Nah, step-step yang harus diikuti itu harus secara tertib diikuti agar hasilnya bisa lebih kredibel. Untuk itu mohon pihak ketiga, Anda kalau sebagai konsultan atau Anda sebagai mahasiswa yang melakukan KKN, pembatasan batas desa ini sensitif, tidak bisa dilakukan sepihak. Harus dilakukan secara seksama dengan pihak-pihak yang terkait. Teknis melakukan pemetaannya dan penarikan garis petanya, itu secara teknis nanti bisa di-guiding oleh BIG. Tapi jangan sampai salah, BIG tidak pernah menetapkan batasnya ke kiri atau ke kanan, karena kita tidak punya kewenangan untuk itu. Harus secara bersama-sama dengan pihak yang terkait. Demikian matur nuwun.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Aris, for the insightful answer, and also thank you, Mr. Farouk, for the question, and thank you for everyone who participated in the discussion. And once again, thank you to Professor Aris Marfai for sharing such valuable insight with us. And before we officially close this session, we would like to conduct the certificate handover. We will now share our screen to display the certificate of appreciation for Professor Aris Marfai. Can you see our screen, Professor?
Much. Thank you all participant. Sukses selalu. Sampai jumpa lagi. Mohon izin untuk pamit. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Aris Marfai, for the session and very insightful information. And we hope we can collaborate again in other chance. Okay, participant, this concludes our session. I am Anissa Trisnia Sasmi, your moderator, thanking you all for your participation, and we will now move to the next part of our conference program. So please stay in our room and wait our upcoming session. Thank you and good afternoon.
Praise to be Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and my peace and blessing be upon our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ladies and gentlemen, Welcome to the second day, the 7th International Conference of Geography and Disaster Management. Thank you for being here today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dina Khairunisa, and I'll be your Master of Ceremony for the second day. We will begin with a paper presentation session, which will take place in 3 separate discussion rooms. Each presenter will have 15 minutes. Please join the discussion room according to your schedule. All right, thank you. We would like to welcome back all conference participants after the break. It is now time for us to move on to the next session. We will now begin our fourth keynote session. It is an honor to welcome Associate from Professor Dr. Rosanak Derviszadeh from University of Twente, Netherlands. The session will be consist 25-minute presentation and followed by a short question and answer. The session will be moderated by Mrs. Dewi Novitasari, MSc. Before we begin the session, allow me to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Mrs. Dewi Novitasari, a lecturer at the Faculty of Geography, Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta. Mrs. Dewi Novitasari completed her undergraduate studies in geography at Universitas Muhammadiyah Surakarta and later earned her master in geography specialist geoinformation at Adam Mickiewicz University, Poland. Mrs. Dewi Novitasari is a highly productive academic and research. This is evident from her publication in various reputable scientific journals, including The Importance of Disaster Mitigation. In 2023, she published an important study titled The Detection of Flood Hazard Potential Zone by Using Analytical Hierarchy Process in Junang Watershed Area, Indonesia, which is a major contribution to disaster risk mitigation effort in Indonesia. And then, utilization of advanced technology. She also explored the use of modern mapping technology, as evident by her work in the same year, tsunami hazard mapping based on coastal system analysis using high resolution unmanned aerial vehicle imagery. To the moderator, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dina, for for opening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let us thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala because of His blessing we are able to come here to join in this conference. May prayer and peace be always upon the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Thank you very much for preparing yourself to join our virtual conference in the second day of ICGDM, respectable for all keynote speaker and invited speaker, the honorable lecturers of Faculty Geography, UMS, and the honorable all participants of this virtual conference. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dewi Novitasari. You can call me Dewi. I'm lecturer in Faculty Geography, UMS, and serve as moderator of the session today. I'm very happy to see you here and welcome all of you to join on the last day of the session ICGDM 2025. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we start the presentation, I would like to read the sequence of last keynote and invited session today. Before we will move into break room for presenter at 3 p.m., we still have one keynote speaker and one invited speaker from University of Twente, Netherlands. Before we start, I have several housekeeping of this session. The presentation time for keynote speaker, Dr. Rosanak Dervishadeh, will have 20 minutes for presentation, and following next with discussion, question and answer session around 5 minutes. And then today's session is being recorded to be available for viewing post-conference. If you have any question for presenter, please let me know. You can use the raise hand feature in this Zoom. You can also submit a question via the chat feature for presenter to answer after this session. And then for those who are not speaker, please turn off your microphone as well so we can focus on the material. If you have any technical problem or question, please reach me out directly via the chat function. Okay, before we begin, I would like to read the CV from Dr. Rosanak Dervishadeh. Okay, hello. Yeah. Dr. Rosanak Dervishadeh is a senior associate professor in the Department of Natural Research, NRS, Faculty of Geoinformation Science and Earth Observation, ITC. Yeah. Her research interests in quantitative remote sensing for mapping and modeling dynamic of plant ecophysiological traits, aiming to enhance the understanding of ecosystem integrity and functioning and to explain the complexity and interaction within terrestrial ecosystem. Her research includes analyzing remote sensing data from various platforms and scale for assessing vegetation dynamic, health, disease, and abiotic and biotic stress factors with application in agricultural and natural ecosystem. In 2024, she was recognized as an ICGDM senior expert in plant health. She has a keen interest and considerable experience in capacity building activities in the majority world. And Dr. Dervish has more than 25 years of experience in leading and carrying out international research projects. She is a member of several national and international professional associations and an associate editor for a number of remote sensing journals. Besides education, research activity, mentoring, and supervising of MSc and PhD students, Dr. Dervish is actively working toward fostering equal opportunities for women in academia, particularly in Earth observation science through the EO4AL initiative, and she co-chaired the sounding board group of associate professor in the Dutch network of women professor. Okay, so hello, Dr. Dervish. Can I?
Hello,
Thank you, Dr. Dervish.
good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to you. Thank you again for inviting me to this conference. It's a pleasure to be among you and to present some of the work that we are already basically in progress and busy. And as you introduced me nicely, thank you very much for that. A large part of my research currently focus on looking at different stress factor and plant health, and particularly looking at different biotic and abiotic factors affecting the, let's say, remote sensing of, let's say, vegetation. And today my talk is also will be on that. So if I may be able to share my screen, is that okay?
Yes, of course, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I will be talking today about remote sensing for assessment of crop biotic and abiotic stress, and why that is why this is important, because our agriculture is under pressure. Crop production is subject to multiple biotic and abiotic stressors, and that reduce and limit the output and production, which is in turn affect the food security. Climate change is expected to increase the frequency and severity of these stressors, and there is a need for methods that we can as early as enough to monitor the impact of this type of stressors at large scale. However, field observations of crop status is very difficult and challenging because most of the times when we are planning to go to the field, we ask these questions that where do we need to collect our samples? What are the pre-assumptions that we consider before going to the field is very much depends on the knowledge of the expert and knowledge of the basically people who are going to do the field work, and this is a critical status because everybody may have different type of let's say assumption before going to the field. There are a couple of fragmented and overlapping effort at the EU level, but very few at the global level. So there are very few actually initiatives to collect remote data, which is useful for monitoring plant condition at the globe level. Data sharing is a problem, and the quality of the data which is captured by different groups is a major bottleneck basically. And the harmonization of the field data collection and collaboration in field data collection is mainly bound to many organizational and institutional boundaries, and therefore it's not possible to always let's say harmonize your field data protocol with another institute that is also planning to perform field work. And then most of the let's say funding that we receive for research is also do not cover the fieldwork expenses. So usually fieldwork costs and fieldwork expenses is something that we have to let's say cover from our other work, and therefore the budget is usually not a lot. So collecting field observation is really challenging. Therefore, the Earth observation data is our ultimate source of information at larger scale. Proximal sensing and airborne field campaign provide detailed information, though they are basically expensive and sometimes need permission from the state government to fly, for example, UAV, or to fly airborne data. Ground observation and field campaign, as I already discussed, are tedious and they are expensive. It's not possible to collect all these field observation at a larger scale. Usually you need ethical clearance for collection of the field data and from the farm manager or stakeholders, and depending on the environmental condition, data collection may not be feasible. For example, in the previous slide, you see a case where we are in the rice field and basically the rice field is flooded, and this is not really a major flood, it still is basically doable, but sometimes, most of the time, environmental condition in rice field is not very easy to be able to collect field data. And by the time it is possible to collect the field data, we may actually lose the season or lose the phenological stage or the moment that we have to be in the field. Therefore, satellite data are often the only reliable or the viable information that we have to monitor the condition of the crops or in general in vegetation. And now for us, biophysical and biochemical parameters are very important. because the way the plant responds to changing environmental condition is usually reflected by the immediate change in their biophysical and biochemical parameters. They are the main features affecting the spectral signature of plants. If we assume that the effect from the atmosphere and soil background and external factors like eliminated, if we assume that these effects are neglected, the only the only features which are affecting the spectral signature is biochemical and biophysical parameters. Now, understanding the link between the crop stress and disease, these parameters, biophysical and biochemical parameter, and the crop spectral signature, as well as how they interact with each other, and how the combined interaction will affect the spectral signature is crucial. Here I have a very, let's say, brief explanation about why we are using remote sensing data to assess, let's say, disease and stress, or let's say biotic and abiotic factors. As you can see here in the graph, we know that the change in the reflectance in the visible region is mainly affected by the leaf pigment and including chlorophyll, carotenoid, and lignin, and many others. The leaf spectra at the near infrared region is mainly affected by the scattering of the leaf structure, but we also know today that cellulose and lignin and nitrogen also affect the reflectance spectra and the near infrared region. And the short wave, traditionally we knew that it's only water absorption, water content, and the water absorption bands which are forming the spectral reflectance at the shortwave infrared region. But today we know that the reflectance spectra at the shortwave infrared region is mainly affected not only by water, but also, for example, with protein content, or with cellulose and lignin, and with phenolic compounds, with the leaf dry matter content. And all these parameters are actually contributing factors that are disrupted after a stress is happening to a plant. So by occurrence of a stress, it could be due to a disease or a pest infection, or it could be due to, for example, heat or flooding. What will happen is that these biochemical parameters, the flow is disrupted. And when the flow is disrupted, there are going to be change in these parameters. And through these parameters, affect the spectral reflectance in this region. Therefore, we assume that by studying these parameters, we will be able to study the early stress in plants. Here I have a schematic presentation of how, for example, a change in the photosynthesis will affect the spectral reflectance and why we are using this. Here in the right side of the graph, you will see a schematic presentation of the variation of the chlorophyll, and this is caused by stress due to change in photosynthesis. And you can see that by increasing the chlorophyll, we expect that the reflectance in the near infrared, the visible region, particularly in the green and red region, to decrease, while reduction in the chlorophyll content increase the reflectance in this region. And in the left side of the screen, on the right side of the screen, you see that the increase of the water content will result in a lower reflectance in the shortwave infrared region, and the reduction in the water content will increase the reflectance in the shortwave infrared. Now, what we do, we usually use this concept so we understand how, let's say, different biochemical and biophysical parameters affect the reflectance, and therefore, when there is a biotic or abiotic stress, we use this knowledge and we basically see what kind of, let's say, this particular stress, how that affect the physiological parameters, and then based on the knowledge that we have of change of the physiological parameters due to the stress, we can study the stress. Here is an example of their, for example, infestation by a full army worm, where the leaf area index, for example, increase because the insect is basically let's say reduce the leaf area, and we can see on the right side of the screen that the increase of the leaf area is actually cause that the reflectance in the near infrared and shortwave infrared to increase, while lower leaf area index is actually reduce the reflectance in the near infrared and shortwave infrared. So by assuming that the change caused by the pest will affect the leaf area index, we can actually study this pest early enough. Now, it's not only biophysical parameters like the leaf area index or the biochemical parameters like, for example, chlorophyll that affect the reflectance. We also know that the soil background and the let's say texture of the soil background also affect the reflectance of the vegetation. For example, we know that when the soil is softer and has a smoother, is more homogeneous and a smoother surface, we will have a higher reflectance. And when the, for example, compared to when the soil texture is harder. In this example, we are showing silt and versus sand, that we see a silt soil, a silty soil due to a softer texture will have a higher reflectance. Or soil moisture. Soil moisture is also for us very important, because soil moisture, as a particularly, for example, again in rice, we know that soil moisture is going to affect the reflectance of the rice fields, because the higher the moisture, the lower the reflectance of the field. So we should be very aware that the type of the soil or the stage of the, let's say, growing, that we know that, for example, if the rice field is flooded, then the reflectance is going to be lower because of the existence of the water in the background. And now I would like to basically address a few examples of the biotic and abiotic stress. Here, an example of lodging. Lodging is basically a permanent displacement of a stem from the upright position, and basically it could happen at the stem or at the root. And the causes of lodging are wind, for example, a storm, insect, and poor management of the crop. For example, one of the excess of nitrogen, for example, also causes lodging. The impact of lodging is actually very serious, because it causes reduction in the yield. It reduce the grain quality and increase the drying cost. And actually, when the plants are lodged, they are prone to many disease and infestations as well. We on a study that we did on wheat lodging using different let's say optical and radar data, we saw that the reflectance data from a healthy situation is usually lower than when the plant is lodged. So when the plant is basically lodged due to massive surface area that is created by the lodging, if let's say non-realistic leaf area index is basically is happening. So what will happen is that if you use one of these optical instruments that is used for measuring leaf area index in a large field, the amount of the leaf area index that you may read is very high, and this is basically due to the plants which are large and are folded, creating a, let's say, a surface of plant instead of let's say having all these plants in an upright position. So that will increase the reflectance in the near infrared and shortwave infrared. And as you can see from the figure here, the plants which are moderately large have, let's say, relatively lower reflectance than plants which are severely large, and is here shown by the red line, the reflectance. So what we do, we are not only looking at the spectral, here we didn't only look at the spectral reflectance, but we also calculated a lodging score, and that is basically we are looking at the crop angle. We measure the crop angle in the field, and then using the crop angle, we look at the normalized lodging score, which is considering the lodging area and the crop angle. And based on the lodging score, we basically had a classification where we say a lodging score of 0 means that crops are standing in upright position, and a severely large situation is where lodging score is between 0.3 to 0.9. And what we did using this lodging score, we calculated the relationship between lodging score and reflectance data. But here is an example of when this relationship is considered using different vegetation indices and in using different data set. If I want to explain this graph nicely, I would say look at the, for example, first column. In the first column, you see equation for a vegetation index, Y, I, and J, because in here we use all combination of a spectral data. So it's not, this vegetation index is 1 divided by, let's say, first reflectance minus the second reflectance. We didn't use the traditional red and near infrared for calculation of NDVI, for example, or calculation of all the vegetation indices. But what we did, we use all combination of all the bands. So in this example, you see that the area which are shown in red and in, let's say, orange, relatively have high correlation between the lodging score and the reflectance data. So as you can see, for example, using Nmap data and using the field hyperspectral data, I always see a relatively high correlation between the lodging score and the reflectance around the 1,480 to 1,700. So area around 1,500, 1,600 has a high correlation with the lodging score in both field hyperspectral data and in the using the Nmap data. While using Sentinel-2 data, because of the lack of spectral data in this region, we only see, let's say, around 865, let's say, a high correlation, but that's it, because we don't have, let's say, a spectral band in that region. Now, we also looked at the correlation between the lodging score and using different, let's say, machine learning algorithms. And here the result from the PLS using the partial least square. And you can see that we could basically retrieve the a good relationship between measured and predicted lodging score using, for example, Nmap hyperspectral satellite data. A good correlation of around 0.64 could be seen using the Nmap data. Another let's say stress factor that I would like maybe to mention here is also the fall armyworm. So fall armyworm is first reported in 797 in the United States, and in 2016 in Africa, and in 2018 full armyworm become a problem in Asia as well. Damages which are caused by full armyworm is devastating. This is an example of full armyworm in maize. Basically, full armyworm, the favorite crop is maize, but actually it is found in soybean as well as cotton and many other cereal crops. Actually, full armyworm is can actually attack many other crops, but here is an example of the core of the maize because its favorite is maize. And you can see the damage that caused by the full armyworm is actually a kind of severe case where leaves are bitten by the insect, and and it result in the reduction of the, let's say, leaf area in the very earliest stage. We have done a work with through work of one of my PhD students on detection of the full armyworm in using temporal Sentinel-2 data, and for that we had a study area in Bangladesh, where 6 provinces in Bangladesh where data were collected, and we had a large number of observations, as you can see throughout the study area. And you can see that here we looked at the infestation at different growing vegetative stage, and for example, you can see that at the V5 non-infested area, which is the straight line of the purple, is versus the infested area, which is the dashed line. You can see the higher reflectance in the near infrared and shortwave infrared region. And another example of how the reflectance varied in the red and red edge region at different growing stage. For example, at the V12 stage, there is a big difference between the reflectance from infested and healthy leaves. And also Sentinel-1 data, the result from Sentinel-1 data also showed that there is a big difference between the VH, for example, that is obtained through the from healthy and infested area. As you can see, for example, in V12 stage, again, we see a big difference between the healthy and infested fields. Vegetation indices also use a big difference. So for example, we use the different vegetation indices that are sensitive to leaf area changes. And here you can see that, for example, M-carry at the V12 stage was highly significant for detection of the full armyworm. Also the random forest classification showed that we could nicely, with a high, let's say, classification accuracy, we could detect the full armyworm at the V3 and V4 stage. So very early stage is essential for detection of this infestation. And another work using Sentinel-2 data was done on that. And last but not least, we're also looking at the infestation and stresses in rice, and that is the bacterial light blight. That actually bacterial light blight, here is an example that we have done in inoculated rice field at Iri in Philippines, and bacterial light blight has economic importance mainly in Asia and some part of Western Africa. It's mainly happening in irrigated and rain-fed lowland ecosystem, and here the gray area are some of the areas that are suffering from the bacterial light blight around the globe. And what we did, we had some experimental rice field in Iri, and there we inoculated the field with we introduced the bacterial light blight, and we measured the spectral measurement but also biophysical measurement. And these are some preliminary results from that, where we show that, for example, the change in the chlorophyll content from healthy rice versus the infested rice by bacterial light blight, and you can see that bacterial light blight actually affect the biophysical and biochemical parameters in many of them. For example, here the difference between the STAT value, which is representing of chlorophyll, is very clear. And we also notice that there are changes caused by the spectral reflectance in the healthy and infected rice. I don't go, I think my time is finished, but I would just like to make just some concluding remark, is that the crop pest and disease infection at the earlier stage lead to changes in crop physiological parameters, and decrease, for example, of the chlorophyll content is because due to changes that is caused by the photosynthesis, and temporal and multi-source data can be used to target intervention of cereal crops at different growing stage, and a combination of spectral analysis and machine learning could improve the accuracy of the infestation and discrimination. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am willing to answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much for excellent presentation. So we will move to Q&A session. So participant, if you have question for Dr. Dervish, please raise your hand. I will call you on Zoom to ask the question, or maybe you can also put your question in chat column, and don't forget to introduce yourself first. Okay. So we have a question in chat box, yeah, from Mr. Aziz Akbar Mukashaf. From your experience, how accurately can remote sensing technique detect crop stress and classify its cause into biotic or abiotic factor? Do we need to come and observe the crop in the field first?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. What we know by now is that we have only studied the knowledge in the remote sensing for detecting the biotic and abiotic stress. Although there are a lot of work has been done in the field, still is limited. This is the first the thing. What we know is that remote sensing, yes, can be used to assess biotic and abiotic stress, because we assume that the physiological changes that are affected by this type of stress are mirrored in the spectral reflectance. So we expect that these stress factors actually affect the reflectance, and therefore we can do early warning. And yes, we have to go early in the field. I mean, remote sensing data without field observation is meaningless. So whatever we want to do with remote sensing, it also needs validation in the field. Otherwise, only using remote sensing data, you can only guess what is happening. You cannot validate your let's say, guesstimates.
Okay, thank you. So clear, yeah, Pak Aziz. Okay, so this is another question from ICGDM. Sorry if I wrong spelling. How well can remote sensing spread biotic and abiotic stress, and is field checking still required? I think.
Yes, as I think this is overlapped somehow with the previous question. Yes, how well, I can say that some for some stresses, for example, a heat stress or water stress, this is very well studied. But for some of the stresses, we are still in the initial stage. For example, how to detect for example, a particular disease from another disease is still in an earlier stage, I would say, because some of the symptoms that caused by a particular disease could overlap with another disease. So we can say, yes, there is a change, there is something going on, and then we need to do, let's say, field measurement. We need to go to the field and actually do a kind of field inventory to see, okay, there is a change in the reflectance that particularly definitely is an stress, but what kind of a stress that needs a field check. We are still, I think, far away from just looking at the reflectance data and say what kind of a stress is this exactly. 100% sure, I think it's very difficult to say that.
Okay, thank you for your answer. So we
May I ask
have...
one question?
Oh, okay,
Just a
okay,
query.
please, Mr. Asif.
Okay, I'm Dr. Asif Iqbal from Fiji National University. Just a nice presentation.
Thank you.
And just a question, not question, just asking some, I have some query regarding the validation. You are talking about the validation. So for the validation of the spectral data, do we have any other alternate instead of going to the field visit or going to the field observation? Because sometimes we have a large field and going inside the field or in between the field, or it's very hard. So do we have any other alternate and good alternate for the validation?
Yeah, thank you very much
data?
for your question. Actually, if you want to skip the fieldwork, no, I would say. So fieldwork is always needed to validate your guesstimate. But I can say that, for example, you can also look at, let's say, temporal data. You can look at the, let's say, if access to the field is really difficult, you can look at the temporal data and, let's say, pattern of the spectral data in the past, and then how it changed in the next season, or how was it in the previous years. And then you can come to some degree that, yes, there is, you can always say that there is an stress going on, but you will not be able to say what type of stress. Is it biotic or abiotic? That is still needs fieldwork, because you, by looking at the data and the temporal behavior, you may be able to say something going wrong is going on, but you may not be able to say exactly what, unless you have really in detail studied your crop and you know that disease A may cause these changes and disease B may cause these changes. It is only then you can say that, yes, this is this disease, and you don't need field data. But to build this knowledge, you need to have looked at, for example, your crop, whatever, for example, in this case, for example, rice, you should have looked at rice in a long time series, and you should have known all the disease which is happening. And then based on your library knowledge in your library, you may say, yes, the spectral data changed like this. So this is with, for example, 80% the chance of this disease. I hope I have answered your question. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We still actually have a question from Mr. Rauzan Priyandi. How the method of applied earth science can be used to evaluate the geological condition of a region comprehensively?
Wow, this is about geological condition. I would say, okay, usually, you know, what is happening in the ground is usually what we expect as vegetation scientists. We expect that they will appear on the plants. So if I want to look at a geological condition of a region, it's very much depends if this is let's say covered by vegetation, or is it in a, let's say, bare land. Because if I want to look at the geological condition of a bare land, that is outside my expertise, because I'm not a geologist. I am a plant scientist. So, but if we are looking at this condition under, let's say, a vegetative condition, then I would say the growth of the vegetation, let's say the reflectance, again, will somehow translate the background soil, and therefore through the trend of the reflectance in a vegetative area and the type of vegetation which is growing, to some extent we can say the geological condition of the region. But just to use that remote sensing data in a vegetative cover and talking about the geological condition is a bit tricky. I would say is a bit we are not over promising something. It's going to be very difficult, I would say.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So maybe anyone have another question for Dr. Darvis? Okay, so maybe this is the last question. Dr. Darvis, in recent years, we've seen a rapid rise in integration of AI and data-driven approach across education, research, professional field, and so on. Maybe the question, how do you see the role of geospatial and geo-AI in the future, particularly for the application in food security and biodiversity?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Actually, this is my own opinion, so I only limit to my knowledge. You know, using AI is of course very important, but what is AI? AI is the knowledge of human which is entered into a system. Now, you can imagine if this knowledge is properly and correctly input into the system, of course, this AI is going to be a very useful AI because it has contained the correct information. But sometimes the information which exists in the AI is not necessarily the let's say the true science which is behind what's happening. So what I want to here notify is that yes, the use of AI is going to be let's say the future, I would say, but there's always a human needed to check, a human expert, not just a human, but the human expert in the field needs to validate this data. So I would say in 20 years' time, I expect that this advanced data from these advanced satellites are much known and used by people in the field of food security and biodiversity, and therefore this, because it is used widely in the literature by then the AI are also going to be much, let's say, clever or more, let's say, giving more proper answers. But I would say always the use of the AI, or let's say geo AI in this case, it needs also a human expert for validation. We cannot only rely on what AI says, because not to our experience today has been proven that not whatever is given by the AI is actually correct and legitimate.
Okay, thank you very much for your clear answer, Dr. Darvis. Very great points from Dr. Darvis. Please stand by for the next round of discussion, if any question. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. We will move to the last but not least, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to invite our next speaker, Ibu Vidiana Nahdiatul Fikriyah MSc. Okay, wait a moment.
Yes. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Before we begin, I would like to read CV from Ibu Vidiana Nahdiatul Fikriyah MSc. She is PhD candidate in Faculty of Geoinformation Science and Earth Observation, University of Twente, Netherlands, and also lecturer in Department Geographical Information Science, Faculty Geography UMS. Ibu Vidya is a researcher and lecturer specializing in agricultural and earth science with a strong focus on ratun race mapping and characterization using Sentinel-1 and 2 imagery. And she has published in reputable international journals such as Remote Sensing Application, Society and Environment, and collaborate with global research team working on agricultural monitoring and satellite-based analysis. Her expertise includes radar backscatter interpretation, optical SAR data integration, crop mapping, and the use of satellite observation to support agricultural and environmental application. She brings solid experience in satellite data processing, scientific writing, and presenting research at international conference. Today, Ibu Vidya will be presenting about remote sensing technology for agricultural practices, detection, and mapping. Hello, Bu Vidya, how are you? Nice
I'm
to
good.
see
I'm
you
good. Thank
again.
you.
Okay, I hope everything is going well for you. You'll have around 20 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for Q&A from participants. So without
Okay.
any further ado, please welcome Ibu Vidya. Oh,
Yeah.
actually,
Thank you very much for the introduction. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity and also for the introduction. My name is Vidya, and I am currently doing my PhD in the the Resource Security Department in the Faculty of Geoinformation Science and Earth Observation in the University of Twente. And today I'd like to talk about the part of my project, which is related to the remote sensing technology for agricultural practices, detection, and mapping. So I will start my presentation with something we face in our daily life. So this is food. We all need food to live, and yeah, we need food to be able to continue our life. But do you know that the report from the Global Security Index shows that reported that there is food crisis in different nations, and so zero hunger goal is at risk. It is expected that more than 600 million people worldwide are projected to face hunger in 2030. So we also see that a lot of negative impacts related to agriculture. For example, the land degradation to the intensive plowing, and also the air pollution due to land burning, and also the use of fertilizers. In this case, it indicates that good agricultural practices are highly required for agriculture and also the environmental conservation. That's why in the Sustainable Development Goals, there's the goals number 2 to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and also promote sustainable agriculture. And there is sub-target in that goals, which is the target of number 2.4, talking about the sustainable food production and resilient agricultural practices with the indicator of proportion of agricultural area under productive and sustainable agriculture. So here you see the cycle of stages in agricultural production. So the whole stage of agricultural production, from the field preparation, planting, and also the main season, water, and also fertilizer application, until the harvest and post-harvest residue management. In each stages of this agricultural production, farmers decide what practice they do. So the agricultural practice, we can refer to the various techniques used in the farming to cultivate crops, covering everything from preparing the soil to harvesting. And out of these whole stages, I'd like to focus on the off-season practices. So 2 practices. The first one is the soil tillage, and the second one is the ratuning. I'd like to talk about it in details in the next slides. So overall, we want to know and monitor the distribution of agricultural practices as part of promoting conservation agriculture. And the big question is, how can remote sensing technology be used to detect agricultural practices? In this case, we use different approach, making use different characteristics from the satellite remote sensing data, from the temporal, spectral, and also spatial resolution. So from the temporal resolution, we can see the time series pattern and detect the key growth stages to discriminate different agricultural practices, and also using the spectral resolution to detect the key band and indices, and also the spatial resolution to relate the class details and the scope of classification. First of all, let me introduce you about the tillage practice and soil health, its relation to the soil health. So soil tillage is the mechanical manipulation of the soil to manage crop residue and prepare a seed bed. So it's done in the early season before the planting. There is advantage of using the soil tillage, which is to loosen soil and also control pests and suppress weed. But also there is a disadvantage of this practice, which is disrupt the soil structure and accelerate the surface runoff and erosion, as we have seen in this picture on the right. The first study we conducted in the experimental site at the Rothamsted Research in the UK, which is a large-scale rotation experiment, divided into 60 plots with different crop types and also tillage practices, the intensive and also conservation tillage. Crops are winter wheat, rapeseed, beans, lay, and also beetroot. So this is the picture of the study area. Let's see how it looks like on the ground. So in general, there are two types of soil tillage, which is intensive tillage and also conservation tillage. The intensive tillage, as we see here on the left side, it's looks like a bare soil. So because of the deep tilling, while on the right side, we see the conservation tillage, we still can see the crop residue and stubble. So if we see how it looks like in the time series, using the PlanetScope data with 3-meter resolution, we can see the difference in the early season. So we can check the plowing and also the sowing time. And with the conservation tillage field, it has increasing reflectance from the NDVI. And then from that key period, we can do the classification and detect which part is, which field under the conservation or under the intensive tillage. For the second practice, I'd like to introduce you with the rice ratooning. So rice ratooning is a production of a second crop from leftover stubble after the harvest of the main crop. So on the left, we have the main crop here, and then we do the harvest. And then the stubble is left on the ground, and then there is a regenerated tiller and panicle. So this is the ratoon crop. So what are the advantage of doing rice ratooning? So it can have more harvest. It can produce more harvest without seedling and land preparation again, and also short cultivation period, and also it reduces the labor, fertilizers, and water resource. Here we see the global distribution of rice ratooning practices around the world. So especially, for example, in Indonesia, it has been practicing using different names, Salibu and Singgang, and we also can see here on the left side the rice ratoon. For the next study, we can see the time series data, time series condition of the rice ratooning. So here we use the time series of Sentinel-1, 1A, and 1B. And after we do the pre-processing, we assign images for every growth phase and harvest. And then we extract the value of VV, VH, the ratio, and also the radar vegetation index. We do the significant test and also see the backscatter difference. The location or the study area here is in the Philippines, covering 4 province of the Philippines. Now we see here the temporal backscatter signature of field with and without rice ratooning in the all growing season and harvest. So on the left, we see the field without ratooning, and on the right we see the field with ratooning. And here we can also see the increasing backscatter, especially in the VV and also VH polarization after the harvest of the main crop. So here, yeah. We can also check or see the difference between the main rice and ratoon rice. So the difference of backscatter of main rice and ratoon rice throughout the growth phase. So this box plot presenting temporal backscatter variation of the main and also the ratoon rice crop. For the next, we do different approach using the integration between optical and also SAR data. So we make use the reflectance from the optical data and also the backscatter from the SAR data. And after that, after we do the pre-processing, we extract a value, backscatter value, and also reflectance value, and also the indices value. And then we do the classification. In this case, we use random forest classification to classify and also to detect where the ratoon rice crop is. So here we can see the backscatter and reflectance difference between the main and also ratoon rice crop especially during the reproductive to ripening growth phases, referring to the first study. So here we can see the ratoon rice distribution and also the area estimation in the Philippines, covering the 4 provinces of the study area. And we see here that it is estimated around 4% of ratoon rice out of the study area. So this is also examples of remote sensing for agricultural practices detection and mapping, referring to the cycle of stages. We can understand that every stages in the agricultural production, farmers do different practices, and this open an opportunity to detect all of them. So there's rice ratooning and also transplanting and direct seeding, intensive and conservation soil tillage, and also the alternate wetting and drying versus the continuous flooding. So this all is just an example. So if you have interest on that, you can check later. So as the conclusion of my talk and also what is the contribution of this study, so this work demonstrates the potential use of especially the satellite-based remote sensing data for detecting and mapping agricultural practices. And we use the variation in the spatial, spectral, and temporal aspect of remote sensing data to allow the detection of agricultural practices. And this work mainly contributes to the supporting agricultural productivity, agricultural also modeling for the environmental resilience, as well as hopefully for better decision making in resource management, especially such as the water and also fertilizers. So thank you very much for your attention, and I give the floor to the Ibu Dewi.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ibu Vidya, for your excellent presentation. So, for participants, if you have any question for Ms. Vidya, you can raise hand or write down on the chat below on your Zoom. So we have a question from Pak Aziz Akbar Mukashaf. Can remote sensing technology replace conventional methods within agricultural practices for detecting crop disturbance caused by disease, pests, and environmental stress?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think I would like to highlight the need of field checking. I agree with what have Dr. Roshanak said before about the field checking, because we can imagine that satellite remote sensing data is put far away. So there will be some error. We can expect some error in the pre-processing, and yeah, so we need field checking to validate our interpretation of satellite data. Yes, so I don't think it will replace fully, but it's a complementary data.
Okay, thank you. Participant, do you have any question? From Bapak Abdul Malik Balami. Okay. No? Okay. Maybe Mbak Vidya, in many countries like Indonesia, where agricultural area are vast and ground-based observation, sometimes are often limited or uneven data. So we think that remote sensing has become an increasingly important tools to support monitoring agricultural effort. In this context, what do you think? How can remote sensing technology improve the detection and mapping of agricultural practice, especially in region with limited ground-based data?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think because nowadays many satellite remote sensing data are available with different spectral, spatial, and also temporal resolution. In that case, we have some alternatives which data we can use. And another approach is we can also do the integration, the combination, for example, from the reflectance from the optical data and also from the SAR data, especially if it's implemented in the cloudy area. So I think SAR data, we can also use the SAR data as a complementary data of the optical data.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Vidya. So, we still have one last question, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
How could your method can be applied to enable food sovereignty instead of food security?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think achieving food sovereignty instead of food security is going to be a big challenge. I mean, it's still a challenge, but I think we can do that. For example, in the perspective of remote sensing data, we can make a better modeling in the yield, for example, so we know more which area is lacking and which area has surplus of food, for example. So in the perspective of remote sensing, it can be useful to improve the yield modeling, for example, and also for the detection of crop field. for that food sovereignty and food security target.
Okay, thank you. I thought there were no more questions. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, thank you. Okay, due to time limitation, I would like to say thank you very much for Dr. Darvis and Ms. Vidya. I would like once again to read the conclusion from Dr. Darvis and Ms. Vidya. From Dr. Darvis, she has just presented about biophysical and biochemical parameter on spectral signature of vegetation. Remote sensing provides an effective, timely, and scalable approach for detecting and monitoring crop stress, including lodging and plant disease. By capturing variation in spectral reflectance, vegetation indices, and structure change, remote sensing enables early identification of stress symptoms that are often invisible to the human eye. And from Ms. Vidya has just presented about remote sensing technology for agricultural practices, detection and mapping. This work demonstrates the potential use of satellite-based remote sensing data for detection and mapping agricultural practices. As technology, remote sensing improves our ability to monitor agricultural practice, supporting both agricultural productivity and environmental resilience, as well as better decision-making in agricultural research management. Okay, once again, thank you very much. I would like to say thank you for Dr. Rosana Darvisade and Vidya Nahdiatul Fikriyah MSc as speaker for amazing presentation. Please give applause virtually for the speaker and for you all. Before we close this session, I would like to give an appreciation for in the form of certificate. Okay, wait a second. Okay. Thank you very much. This is our certificate for Dr. Rosana Darvisade. And then our second certificate for Ibu Vidya Nahdiatul Fikriyah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your nice and great presentation. Also, thank you for all the participants for very active participation in this seminar. Hopefully, this seminar will be beneficial for everyone. After this session, we still have panel session of each track paper, so still keep in touch. I'm Dewi Novitasari as a moderator. I also apologize for my mistake in delivering my speech, if any. So I give back to you, Master of Ceremony, for announcement session today. Thank you, Dr. Darvis. And
thank you very much
Ms.
again
Vidya.
for the invitation, and I hope it was a useful presentation for you all. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you.